Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only global podcast focused on cycling purely from the entirely superficial point of view of style, fashion, looks, and aesthetics. I'm your host, Alex. This week, there's no Warren. Warren is actually out riding in areas where his internet connection is not very good. So this week, it's just Warren. It's just myself and Tony, my co-host, but we also have a very special guest who will join us later on the program. His name is Premton. He is a cyclist, a sailor, a watch collector, a shop owner, and an artist. And he'll be here to talk to us about his aesthetic philosophy and other topics when it comes to cycling. Tony, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing really great. And I was, we obviously talk aside from this podcast. So this weekend we were talking about our bike rides, and both of us did something really exciting, really sort of important to the world of cycling. And we were sort of messaging about it. And I was excited to be able to get on the recording and bring it up. And that is, we rode our bikes without computers.
Yes. So this thing happened to me where I was in the city, my bike computer was in the country, and I wanted to go out for a ride, beautiful fall riding. And I said, let's do this old school. We're gonna get out on the bike without a bike computer. And honestly, I'd say in the last few years, like I've been maybe a little bit too much into the numbers, watts per kilo, this kind of stuff. And I just went out and rode hard in the crisp fall air, and it was awesome. It sort of rekindled the romanticism of cycling for me, of not looking down at my head unit, just riding hard, appreciating the surroundings as well. And it was something that I think I'm definitely going to do again.
Like, I agree. It was a great feeling. I actually was very conscious about it because you had mentioned it, and I thought, I haven't done this in a long time. I'm going to try it. But from a visual standpoint, the whole time I was riding, I was debating in my head, and I want to get your take on this. Should you take off the computer mount when there's no computer on it? Should that not be on your handlebars, or should you leave it on? Because I'm just going to stay right now. At first, I thought I have to take this thing off, right? There's no computer. A bike looks better the more sort of clean it is. But I ran into a couple people I knew on the ride, and they pointed out that I wasn't riding with a computer, and that felt really good. Like, oh, no computer today. And I'm saying, yeah, I just want to get out there. I want to get on feel. I didn't want to worry about the numbers and average speed and power and stuff. I just wanted to get it. So from an aesthetic point of view, I kind of want to say take the mount off. But I really like that people notice I didn't have a computer. Not that I didn't own a computer. I own one because I own the mount, but I didn't put it on. What's your take on that?
So taking the mount off would be the equivalent of not having a cell phone. Leaving the mount on, but with no computer, would be the equivalent of having a flip phone, in the sense that I'm too cool to have a smartphone. I have a flip phone, and that's just how I roll. So I feel that's how, like, leaving the mount on is kind of a power move in a sense, because you're letting people know that you don't need to track your watts per kilo. You're just riding for the romanticism and enjoyment of cycling. Personally, I don't have the mount because I value the clean aesthetics of just not having the mount on my cockpit there. But I think they're just two different propositions. I think they're both okay, personally.
I agree. I think it's a 50-50 thing. And you definitely want people to know that you're riding with more elegance than they are. That, yeah, you could have the computer. You understand the need of the computer, but on this current ride, you are out for the beauty of cycling. No one's going to know. You're not going to Strava it. I'm not recording it on my phone or anything. It's just for me and my body and my own senses to sort of understand where I'm going, how far I might be going, and how fast I might be doing that. So I like that, because you're definitely going to run into people, and they should know that you don't have your computer on.
And just to piggyback on this writing without a computer idea, recently there was the men's elite road race of the world championships that took place over in Belgium, in Flanders. It was an incredible race, just attacks left, right, and center, just guys going all out for 260 kilometers, pure, race tactics winning the race. And what was special, I think, about that race, and one of the reasons why it was so fun to watch, was because the riders were not using race radios. And you were seeing Julien Alaphilippe there. He was needing the motorcycle to let him know how many seconds of a lead he had. And to me, that is the pro racing equivalent of riding without a computer. So perhaps, a little less technology sometimes is good for all of us. And it's, it can certainly make for a stylish proposition as well.
Completely agree.
Okay, so we'll start with our segment where we review new releases, either in kit or in bikes. And this week, I think the biggest item that got released that we need to talk about is the 2022 Cervelo R5 carbon frame that just got released by Cervelo. It garnered a lot of attention on the internet. It's essentially an evolution of their long-standing R5 frame that they've had for a long time. We'll put a picture on our Instagram. Make sure you go follow us there at Cycling Fashion Week. And a couple of things stand out with respect to this bicycle. So first of all, very kind of high grade carbon. Uh, it's a climbing bike. Essentially, the way that Cervelo markets this is it's, almost at the UCI weight limit. It's an extremely light bike. You should be flying up hills with that. This should be the bicycle that Primoz Roglic's and Tom Dumoulin's team will be riding in the mountains in Grand Tours. Apparently, Primoz Roglic tried the bike, said it was great. Uh, several design elements that I'll let Tony cover, but also what was interesting is definitely a trend in bikes. The tire clearance is getting wider and wider. So you've got, on the one hand, this very, very light bike, but you can put tires as wide as 34 millimeters here. So, Tony, what did you think about the new Cervelo R5?
Yeah, well, usually when a new bike gets released and we're talking about what we want to, bring to the table for the podcast, I'm usually new bikes. They're redundant, and I don't want to see them. But when this came out, it really jumped at me because it's clear the engineers at Cervelo, are listening to the podcast. They're understanding where the bike should be going, and they have raised the seat stays back to the correct position. This bike no longer has drop seat stays, so immediately it just becomes one of the most sort of beautiful bikes released in the last couple of years, just based on the fact that we're getting back to the sort of correct aesthetic geometry of the bike. From sort of the other standpoints of it aesthetically, it's not sort of too stand out, which I like. The photo I have on Vélo News is of the matte black, so we know there's issue there, but we'll assume they'll release it in some other colorways. Yeah, it's the Dura-Ace Di2 clean cockpit, very sort of clean lines and look. Like it's rare I want to say nice things about Cervelos, but for this one, I think actually it's a great bike. I'm really happy with it, and just the jump of the seat stays. Actually, even Vélo News sort of remarked on it in their headline that the seat stays have been raised. So right there, it's got my heart for sort of a new bike for them to go back to what should have never left.
Yeah, so I'm with you on the seat stays. Major points to Cervelo for kind of bucking the trend in current bikes, which is to drop the seat stays as low as you can. Now, I think it's a nice release. The color schemes are pretty safe. I would say they're not trying to go with a bold set of colors that'll definitely get you noticed on the road. Like there's a gray and marigold yellow. There's sort of a charcoal and dark green, and there's an all black as well, matte black, which listeners know what we think about the matte black in general. Now, my main issue with this bicycle is the price. Um, Spending money is cool. We're all for spending money here at Cycling Fashion Week. That is not the issue. But for me, if I'm going to drop, um, 15,000 Canadian dollars on a bicycle, which, for our US listeners, that would probably be around 12,000 US dollars. If I'm going to drop that kind of cash on a bicycle, I need a better story behind it than non-custom carbon frame made in Asia by one of the big brands. It has to be made by an old Italian gentleman by hand in a small factory somewhere. I need something to latch onto that tells me a slightly more appealing story than, this bike had supply chain issues. It took time to arrive from Asia, and I spent $15,000 on it. I also need to not have SRAM as the main group set on my bike for $15,000, because for $15,000, I would like to have a front derailleur that actually works.
Yeah, listen, I said I like the bike. It's a step in the right direction for major bike brands. But in the end, Cervelo is always has and always will be a dentist bike. And so it's for the dentist to spend their 15 grand and to leave the beautiful custom Italian made bikes up to the rest of us. Cervelo will stay in their lane even with improvements.
All right, so that's it for the Cervelo R5. So actually, you got positive comments on Cervelo from Tony and me, which is no small feat. So kudos to Cervelo for their new R5 release. All right, so we'll move on to our next segment. This week we have a very special guest, as I mentioned at the beginning. His name is Premton Batku. He's the owner of a cycling boutique in the city of Toronto in Canada. Very unique cycling boutique, I would say. The name of the boutique is Alpha Vélo. Premton is a cyclist. He's a sailor. He's a watch connoisseur. He's an espresso guy as well. So he's really into pretty much all of the elements that we talk about here on this podcast. We have a very, I would say, similar worldview to Premton when it comes to cycling aesthetics. And yeah, we thought it would be good to have him on the program to discuss this. Premton, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Premton, why don't I let you? So I've given you a little introduction here at the beginning. Just tell us very generally a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from. What do you do? Obviously, said you own a shop. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Originally, I'm from Albania, and I came to Toronto maybe 22 years ago or so. And cycling kind of like has always like followed me from Europe all the way here. Uh, Basically, I used to spend time in Belgium with a family to learn French when I was in my early teens, and two of the boys I used to spend time there, uh, they had road bikes, and every evening before dinner we used to go riding, and I feel like that's where the itch started. And then when I had my first small amount of money that I had saved, I bought a road bike in a garage sale, and I kind of got obsessed with like working on it and riding it, and it just gave me freedom. Yeah, just in general, like I love everything that's like linked to like, I would say, cutting edge technology. I mean, functionality, like extreme mechanics, efficiency, and I always felt like a bicycle is all those things together, right?
Yeah, and learning about cycling in Belgium is definitely not a bad place to start. Whereabouts in Belgium was that?
I can't really remember the village right now, but we were just outside of Brussels.
Okay,
Maybe
in the French speaking part of
yes.
Belgium.
Well, I went there to learn French, right? And we're in the French speaking part of Belgium, so maybe the suburbs of Brussels. I was young; I was 13 or so. I remember. Yeah, the bike was a bit too big for me for sure.
Do you think that like you're sort of mentioning all the things you like about it, and I've noticed there's a lot of architects and sort of designers and stuff in cycling. Do you think that cycling is the kind of perfect marriage of technology and design, where something has to be made with this incredible engineering to function at a high level, but also it's a sport that's always had a rich history in how it looks?
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't get into it from the sports side of it, right? I feel like I started following races and learning like that part of cycling a little bit later, right? I mean, what attracted me to cycling was efficiency and the freedom it gave me as a machine overall, and also anything mechanical always fascinated me. So I would be sitting there in my room and turning the bike upside down because I didn't have a stand, and the bike would be in my room, and just look at how like the gears worked. I'll just pedal the bike upside down with my hands, and always worked on it, and that's what attracted me to it. So not necessarily like the way a lot of people got attracted to it by the sport or for health reasons or whatnot, right? And then those things came later on as I rode the bike. But yeah, for me, it was more like the technology and the mechanical side of cycling that like really attracted me.
It's true that cycling, in a way, like horology, is at the intersection of science and art in a sense, because as you say, Prempton, there's a very heavy mechanical component to it, which is highly engineered. People try to push the boundaries of innovation, but there's also a very strong aesthetic component where you want your bike to look good, and it's really the marriage of those two elements that I think is cool. And then you've got the sports side, which in your case you say came later, obviously. Prempton, and by the way, I want to tell our listeners they should definitely go follow Prempton on Instagram. His handle is at Prempton, so pretty easy to find. Very nice pictures, very nice visuals of where he rides, some of the art that he's putting out as well. Definitely a worthy follow on Instagram. So, Prempton, tell us a little bit about your shop in Toronto. So, it's called Alpha Vélo. I think you're in the west end of Toronto. So how did you come to owning a shop? What pushed you to do it? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the brands that you carry and why you chose to partner with those brands.
Well, basically, all the things I loved about cycling, um, I kind of like curated all the little things I liked about cycling, and I used the shop as a gallery to display these things and also make a business out of it. So for me, the shop is like a small gallery of things I like. I always try to avoid, trying to chase like big brands or anything like that. I always like wanted like small little things that like satisfied me, and whether it was like visually or in terms of like functionality and so on. But yeah, I always saw my shop as like a small gallery with things that I wanted to be surrounded with and or I wanted to use. Yeah.
And tell us about the brands that you chose to partner with, because you obviously said you don't want to be chasing the big brands or things that are perhaps too common or things that are just too hot at the moment. So I've obviously seen on your Instagram, in terms of kit, um, you wear and your shop also sells an Italian brand by the name of Q36.5. So tell us a little bit about that brand, how you came to know that brand. What do you love about it? Why are you carrying it in your shop? Because it's a really interesting one to me. They seem really high tech, but I don't see it a lot on the road.
Yeah, as I said, I always try to escape volume. Right, was never my cup of tea for anything, even especially for environmental reasons too. And Q36.5 actually was the first brand that came in my shop, and it was not planned. Was a simple trip in Italy that I made, actually in northern Italy in Bolzano, where I wanted to meet Luigi Bergamo that started Q36.5. And Luigi Bergamo is someone with like more than 20 years of experience in the highest level of like the sector of like bicycle clothing and so on. When I met up with him, what was supposed to be like an hour meeting, we ended up chatting and going for a ride and then having dinner. And I ended up spending my whole day in Bolzano. And both we had like a similar passion for high tech equipment, high tech clothing, and one thing led to another. And he asked me whether I wanted to bring the brand to Canada. So yeah, that's how it all started. But that was kind of like the first brand, and then the shop slowly grew up from it. After clothing, we started introducing more things: the shoes, the helmets, the sunglasses, and the bikes, and so on. But I feel like it grew very naturally. I never had like a perfect vision what I wanted the shop to be. Uh, I just try to stay creative all the time, and that way I kind of created like a dynamic market, I think.
And your shop has a heavy Italian component. If you look at the brands that you carry, so obviously you talked about Q36.5 from Bolzano. I think you also carry on the glasses front Alba Optics, which is
Yes.
also from northern Italy. And the one brand I do want to talk about is the bikes that you carry. So the carbon frames that are made by Sarto, which, if I'm not mistaken, are also from the Veneto region in Italy, from northern Italy. Tell us a little bit about Sarto, because that's also a really cool brand that I just haven't heard a lot about or seen very much on the road.
It did start with Q, as I said in the beginning, and I will go to Sarto starting from Q. The interesting thing with Q is that what attracted to me about it is that the brand was developed in Bolzano, most of the fabric like manufactured in Lake Como, and everything was within 300 kilometers. So I ended up in a shop with a product that was an Italian product, but also developed and made in Italy. And when I came across Sarto, had the same thing. Was an Italian brand, actually made in Italy, and all of a sudden, that's how the shop grew. Almost all the brands that we have in here are designed and manufactured in the country of origin. Sarto itself, I liked it because it blended the traditional part of cycling and the more advanced part of cycling, which is like carbon fiber and the materials they use. So it's the only brand that it's still built tube to tube construction instead of your usual molded bike that comes from like Cervelo and Specialized and so on. You still put this in a jig, and you can allow to fully customize the brand. So my biggest thing was having a bike brand that is fully customizable and carbon fiber. There's not a lot of those out there.
And so that's fully in-house, right? The way that Sarto go about making frames, because I think it's interesting what you said about Cervelo and Specialized, not to single out these two specific brands, but just the big brands in general, they have, a molded type model and it gets made in Asia, and it's a little bit more generic overall, whereas Sarto is a completely different proposition. Everything gets made from start to finish in Italy, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, as you said, I actually love Specialized. I think they make great bikes. I had one. What attracted me mostly is the ability to customize a full carbon fiber bike. That's what attracted me to it. It's hard to just stick to small, medium, and large for a lot of people. And when you come at this price point, that I mean, we know Sartos are not cheap bikes. When you come to this price point, which is comparable in a way to a Pinarello, you want to have a little bit of more than just size medium. You want to have a shoe that fits you. You want to have something that, in one way, describes your aesthetics by choosing your color and so on. It's not necessarily the first bike for a lot of people. I always say it's usually like the second or the third bike. But yeah, just it's a bike brand that really like allows you to build a bike that fits you.
Yeah, you definitely don't come into cycling and start with a Sarto. That would be pretty aggressive. Maybe if you're Premton's best friend and that's how you learn about cycling, maybe that's where you start. But I think for most people, you start with an aluminum Specialized or Giant, and then yeah, and then you evolve towards that. But what you said really appeals to me, because I think part of what you're saying is the customization, and I agree with that. But I also think that if you're spending that kind of money on a bicycle, you need a story behind it. You need a better story than generic carbon frame made in Asia. As good as that frame is, because as you said, they're very good, but anyway, to me, you require something about the craftsmanship, something about how the product is made, the story behind the company, and that's where I think a brand like Sarto, gives you this. I'm a steel guy, and I own a Marinoni, and I'm sure you heard about Giuseppe Marinoni, just outside of Montreal, has been making frames by hand for many, many years. And that kind of sort of company definitely appeals to me. So that I think that's where the appeal of a brand like Sarto comes from.
Yeah, I also with Sarto, I also developed a relationship because walking in the factory and actually seeing these bikes made in front of you, walking the factory a year later and seeing your customer's bike hanging half finished in the factory, ready to be painted with your shop name and ready to go into a second set of hands. The extra care that goes into making each piece unique that was something that like I was like chasing to have.
Yeah, there's definitely a romanticism to something like that compared to the more generic experience of dealing with the bigger brands, which again is a great way to get into cycling. There's nothing wrong with that as well.
I always say that when you go buy a bike off the shelf, and let's say me and you are the same height, but one of us is 140 pounds, the other one is 180, 200 pounds, but we are the same size bike. How will that bike behave? You know what I mean? With, let's say, like a 50-pound difference in weight, right, of a rider.
Premton, are you intimating that I'm 50 pounds heavier than you are?
Well, I didn't say which one was 50 and which one was 40. Uh, but I think we're both pretty well under that. No, basically what happens is that when you go custom, you can actually choose the layout of the carbon fiber and make sure that that bike will behave the same, whether you are 200 pounds or you are 150 pounds. That's something we always miss. Usually we're used to a new bike brand coming out and saying, hey, this is our new bike. I'm not going to mention brands, but everybody does that, says the newest, the stiffest, the fastest, and so on. But how will that bike behave with a 50-pound weight difference from one rider to another, right? Versus a custom bike, you can change the layout, or in a steel bike, you can get different tubing, and yeah, so you can make the bike ride the way you want it to ride.
Yeah, it's completely different. That's a good point, actually. It's a completely different experience based on the rider.
I feel like that's the appeal of custom bikes, whether it's a Sarto or something else, or whether it's carbon fiber or it's steel.
Even like I have a, Alex and I actually have sort of cousins bikes. We both have the same Marinoni, and mine was custom. And I'm quite a tall guy, but I have very sort of unique body proportions. So the top two of my bike is actually a 54, even though I'm about 6'3", because I have these very long legs and sort of short torso. So my first ever road bike was a 58, and I could barely ride it. And everyone's looking at me thinking like, why aren't you, you should, I'm trying to shorten the stem and all this stuff. And then even my sort of previous to my custom Marinoni was a 56, and still never felt quite comfortable from where it's supposed to be. And then yeah, you go and you get the custom fit geometry, because we're not, just because most people who are 6'3" or 58 doesn't mean all people are 6'3" or 58. So it's changed my whole riding. The little bit of extra cost that it added. I mean, it's an expensive bike, but once you're getting up into that kind of echelon to do custom, like you said, Sartos are kind of on par with Pinarello. The cost is just worth it, because it's going to change your whole life of how you ride your bike.
And Prempton, do you carry any steel in the shop?
I actually do. So we have, I'd say, the carbon fiber department is Sarto, and out of that we make a lightweight climbing bike, we make like a fully integrated bike, an aero bike, and then for steel we carry Vélo cycles out of Barcelona,
Oh, out of Barcelona. Yeah, they're super nice, actually.
built by Enrico Belle. I actually have two in the shop right now.
Is it
Um,
Prempton? Is it an Argentinian guy out of Barcelona? Did I get that right?
no, no, no. Enrico is Italian,
Oh,
but
he's
is
Italian.
based in
Okay.
Barcelona. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Interesting.
It's Italian from Piemonte, Torino
Sure.
to be exact, and but he's based in Barcelona.
Yeah, I've definitely seen them around Instagram. They look beautiful. The finishing looks pretty incredible on those bikes. Okay, so that's your steel department that you carry.
Yeah, that's our steel bikes, and it's a brand I picked because even though it's a traditional material, Enrico himself is not afraid to actually follow more modern methods and kind of like evolve with the industry, but still keeping steel. So like looking at like maybe putting like fully integrated cockpit into like a steel bike with like TIG welding and round tubes, right? So getting those like minimalistic aesthetics blended with something classic. And he's not afraid to do everything internal. A lot of steel builders, they like to have everything external still, right? So
And did you meet Belle just the same way that you got in touch with Q when you traveled to Bolzano? You went to Barcelona and just met with them, or how did that collaboration come about?
not just him, but every single brand that I have in the shop, I know the people behind the brand personally. I spent quite a bit of time in Europe during the winter time, so the shop is closed from Christmas Day until February, and that's my time where I usually put things in production, check out the new collection, make the orders, and so on. And most of the time, I'm in the factories. I go from one factory to another. There's something when you actually touch things before you order them. Um, I don't like to do things like over the screen or over an Excel file. I like to see things in hand. Even Alba Optics, Pier Giorgio, they're based just outside of Milano, and it's always a pleasure to just go and visit those guys, have lunch, check out the new products, playing around like with the glasses is yeah, it's something I enjoy doing. And every single product in here, it's I have a close relationship with the founders themselves.
So definitely a well curated shop. So you go to Europe in the winter, you get the orders, and so am I correct in assuming that for our listeners, if anyone wants to put in an order with Alfa Velo, the time to do this would be in the fall?
Exactly, exactly. Most of the custom orders, especially for bikes and things that take a long time. Even we do Luigino Verducci shoes out of Italy. If somebody wants a custom shoe, I mean, we did a few gold and chrome shoes that are seen around the city.
Premton, what color of socks do you wear with a gold shoe?
White or black.
Interesting. Actually, what I could see white. Yes, I could see white. I just really have an aversion to black shoes and white socks personally, but I could see gold shoes with white socks. That would be a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, if you remember, Paolo Bettini, like I mean, Italian former like world champion, right? I mean, he was to me, he was like the one I fell in love with gold shoes. He used to wear the gold CDs, right, with the white socks.
Yeah, so Paolo Bettini, actually, I believe he is now a commentator on Italian television. I subscribe to Rai on cable here, and when it's the Italian races like Strade Bianche, for example, you see him out there commenting on the races. I think he's still buddies with Mario Cipollini as well.
Yeah, they're good friends, but I don't think Mario is going to be a commentator. I think rough
Well,
on the edges.
he's got his own bike brand as well, right?
Yes, yes, he does. He does.
Is Mario Cipollini like the most Euro god of all time of cycling, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, uh, there's a lot to mention. I like a lot of riders. I mean, one of my favorite riders is actually Alberto Contador. I always
Ooh,
loved the
interesting.
I always loved the way he rode. I love the way he climbed.
Dancing on the pedals, they used to say.
Exactly,
Out
exactly.
of the saddle.
Out of the
Out of
saddle,
the
he was
saddle.
dancing on the pedals. Absolutely beautiful.
What do you think of his bike brand, Premton? He launched the Aurum bike brand recently, and there's a shop in Quebec City called the Vélo Cartel. They do really nice stuff, and they carry that brand. Any thoughts on the bike brand from Contador?
I don't know much about it, but I'm sure it's a great bike brand. But I haven't really looked much into it yet. But yeah, it looks great. It looks very practical. It's kind of like a semi-integrated aero bike, a bike that kind of does everything. Yeah, I haven't ridden it or I haven't seen it in person, so it's hard for me to comment on it.
Yeah. So, Predator, I want to circle back on our topic about the what socks to wear with the gold shoes, and
Yeah,
kind of bring this conversation forward, talking about the ethos of Cycling Fashion Week is all about being integrating sort of tradition and elegance into cycling, and sort of espousing that out to our listening public. So we want to kind of get what are your sort of top things that are must-haves when getting yourself prepared for a ride, your bike, your kit, in terms of aesthetics, and what are a few of the faux pas you never want to see people wearing while they're out on the bike?
well, I think must have black bibs. Let's start with that. Is your contact point with the bike, right? So that's I think we should definitely start with that. I think your first pair of bibs should be black, whether you like
Are
other
you
colors later.
uh, are you anti white bibs though? Like as a later investment?
Absolutely not. I fully embrace them. I don't wear them, but I've been seeing a few lately. They're coming back. But yeah, I just feel in terms of more like I'm more about practicality, right? Even like my cycling style is more about practicality than
Because
just
I just want to put it on the record. I'm extremely pro white bibs. I think it is a very 1990s Euro look, and if Julien Alaphilippe isn't wearing white bibs with his rainbow jersey, I think he should have the rainbow jersey taken away from him.
I mean, look, definitely somewhere in the mountains in Europe, climbing or descending with white bibs, it's a good look. I don't know as much here around Toronto, but
White bibs in January.
there's a place for everything.
All right, so what else are your musts, your must-haves in terms of cycling style when you go out on your everyday ride?
As I said, it's all about location. Uh, I believe, based on my experience in the shop and also what I sell in the shop, because you learn a lot from your clients more than you just learn yourself. It's always accessories, and one of them is vests. In our climate, at least here in Toronto, most of the riding starts fairly cool and it gets warm very fast within a period of 3 to 4 hours. And usually the vest is like a piece you must have all the time with you. And that also, I think it's a great piece to also have like when you are out in the mountains, right? Because you climb without it and you descend with it. So I say that's definitely another key piece to own.
All right, and in terms of the big fashion faux pas that you see a lot in cycling, like tell us about a few of them.
Uh, what I don't like and what I like about like things I like, things I don't like.
Sure.
Basically, a big no-no for me is caps underneath helmets.
Hmm.
I'm not a big fan.
What now? Why is that?
Yeah, because I'm a cap underneath helmet guy, and I did not know that it was a faux pas.
I used to be, and I stopped because I find it's got a bit of a cyclocross look. But let's hear what Premton says about it.
I don't have a thing about the look in it. I think my main thing with bikes, sorry, the position. I'm going to talk first about position on the bike and also safety. Most of the people tend to wear a cap underneath their helmets, and then they like to flick their cap up, and that pushes that helmet backwards. You always want the helmet to be at least a finger or two above your eyebrows. Most of the impact is like head-on impact. Uh, that that head basically pushes the helmet backwards, and I see a lot of people riding with their helmet basically on the back of their head because they're trying to make room for literally their cap like being flipped over to show some cool color.
Like Primoz Roglic in the time trial in the Tour de France last year.
Something like that. And then so basically yeah, so safety for me, like I always felt that helmets don't sit well when you have an actual cap on. The other thing is position on the bike, right? I see a lot of people having, when they have their cap on, having to, curl their neck just to be able to look forward and look up. I really feel like it obstructs your vision. I always believe when people come in the shop and they talk about fit and so on, and they say, "Oh, I'm getting like neck pains or shoulder this that," I'll always say like, "Don't look up." I'm like, look up with your eyes, not with your head, right? That's one thing. Keep your head somewhat straight and like keep your eyes up. I feel like it obstructs with your vision. And
Just as an aside, do you carry helmets in the shop at all?
yes, we carry cask helmets in the shop.
Oh, the goat of helmets. The only thing I'll wear is a cask. Italy made.
The Protone.
Yeah, Proton is great. Vallegra is great. They're releasing the new helmet called Wasabi, and that's gonna be, that's gonna be cool too in terms of the color palette. It's a little bit softer, and yeah.
All right, Premton. So now I want to talk about probably the most important part about cycling, and that is the coffee stop. It's the reason everyone should ride. And I know from knowing you for a while and seeing your Instagram and various things that you love an espresso. So I want to ask you, do you have your espresso pre, during, or post the ride, or all three?
If I'm having an espresso pre-ride, I had a rough night. So I usually like to have an espresso mid-ride, and if I have time, after the ride.
And do you accept any other form? Like, would you have a macchiato? Would you have a cortado? Or is it just espresso? You want no milk? You want no, like, just want like a stretto? Like, what makes a perfect espresso for you?
Usually my go-to is just a simple espresso, no sugar, nothing. A good espresso for me. I mean, espressos are about quality, not quantity. So they got to be short and sweet, and anything that has tiger stripes in it. When pretty much like you get like lighter and darker crema like coming in together at the same time.
Mhm.
That's what makes a good espresso for me.
Best town in Italy to get an espresso.
Ooh, I mean, I've had a lot of good espressos in Italy, but you know what? The Centrale, the train station in Milano. As soon as you go in the train station, on your right, there's a great bar in there, and I always had a good coffee there. If I'm in Milano, I always pass by and have a coffee there.
So I'm gonna go with a bit of a non-consensus choice here. I think Napoli makes some of the best espressi in Italy. Some of the
Yes,
coffee
yes, they do,
shops
they
there,
do, they do,
like very
they do.
messy city, very chaotic, but excellent
Well,
coffee.
it's kind of funny when you drive across Italy, let's say, and you take the autostrada. Every time you like take like a rest stop, auto grill, actually coffee gets better as you drive south.
Autogrill is an underrated coffee place in Italy. Just any stop on the Autostrada is great, and the bomboloni with it are pretty good as well. But yeah, definitely underrated. Okay, Prempton, next topic. We've started to see the pros wear watches on the bike more and more. Julien Alaphilippe won two world championships while wearing Richard Mille watches. What's your take on watches as part of a cycling outfit? And if so, what brand, what reference, what type of watch would you go for?
Cyclists have been wearing watches forever because they didn't have Garmin's before, right? Now we have a Garmin computer or Wahoo, whatever you use. So you don't need to wear a watch, right? Me personally, I wear a watch when I ride because most of the time I just don't have a Garmin with me. Either I don't want to ride with it or I forget to charge it and whatnot. So that's the reason I usually wear a watch.
Which watch do you wear, or do you have a few that you cycle through?
Honestly, just like a basic sub because it's just easy to read, like a Rolex Submariner. Any diver watch, I think works great for cycling because you just take a quick glimpse at it and you can read it.
And you can actually time stuff with the bezel as well. If you're doing a lap or whatever, you can kind of time yourself with the bezel.
Yeah, I guess so. But like the Omata, like a brand of a computer, didn't really work that well with timing.
So that's actually really interesting. So you said you most of the time you ride without a head unit or a computer,
Yeah,
either because you choose to or just out of laziness of having forgotten to charge it. Or
as I said, I never chased. I never fell in love with cycling because of like the physical part of it. Like that came later. For me, I just enjoyed cycling. Yeah, it's like meditation. So usually when I don't have the computer with me or anything like that, I just enjoy my surroundings a bit more.
really interesting, definitely more romantic approach to cycling.
Yeah.
Um, Prempton, you mentioned you go to Europe a lot to see the brands that you partner with, to go to the factories and everything. Best cycling destinations in Europe, in your opinion?
Switzerland, definitely my favorite because there's less cars, less tourists, less cyclists in general. Usually, people like to go to Alpe d'Huez, any of like the big names, just whatever they see on the tour or whatever they see on the Giro. But in reality, is that the Alps, the Dolomites, usually like have way more beautiful climbs than just the usual ones that people know from TV. And the reason those climbs are not featured is because those roads are so narrow. You cannot get cyclists to go through there, spectators, cars, and so on. So I always say, like, if you go to Europe, unless you really want to check the box of climbing Stelvio in your life, then yeah, go ahead and do it. But I feel like you can just take your bike out, open the map, and climb any mountain in Europe. And
Which part of Switzerland, Prempton, have you preferred riding? I rode in Switzerland. I had a friend who was working in a university in Lausanne, and we did a few cols around there, including Col du Marcheroux in Jura Vaudois area.
Yeah,
But have you been
great.
to Ticino or the other parts of Switzerland as well?
I actually last winter I spent about 2 weeks in Ticino, in Orsolina actually, to be exact, and it was a beautiful place to ride, especially in the winter because it was like a microclimate. So throughout the day you had single digits, and you could climb all the way up to the mountains, to the snow line. So yeah, Ticino is spectacular to ride, and there's some beautiful like rides in there that, yeah, I made notes of quite a few of those, so anybody can reach out to me, and I can give some pointers for Ticino. But yeah, Ticino is beautiful. Uh, Most of my riding is just around Geneva, and around Geneva you have big climbs like Colombier. All those are within, I mean, within like 40 kilometers. So it's in an 80-kilometer a loop. You can go up to 2,000 meters and come back home.
So, Premton, I had another question regarding your Instagram because it's something that comes up on it all the time. I'll send you a message, and it always seems that they have been spoken for, but you do some absolutely beautiful line drawing art, and you post them sort of sparingly on Instagram, and I'll see it and think I need that for my wall. Send you a message. You'll say, sorry, spoken for. I got to get around to some more. Can you tell us a bit about the art and sort of your plans for it for the future?
Basically, art has always been a big part of my life, and I always practice it. Lately, I've been like with cycling somehow. Like cycling has like kind of filtered into like my art world, and you just when you work and live it, you also like I feel like you end up painting it or drawing it. So yeah, it was kind of spontaneous. I started posting my artwork on Instagram, and people started showing interest in it, and then when a lot of people started showing interest in it, I decided to make prints. So I started making, like series of 30 prints or 10 prints and so on. And I think it's a thing I'm going to start doing a bit more often, time permitting, of course. It's not easy to just like run a shop and be an artist. But like I kind of want to bring that more and more in Alpha Velo.
And how can we purchase those prints, Prempton, and how can we be made aware that they're available and purchase them?
I always post them on Instagram at the Alpha Velo, on the Alpha Velo Instagram page, and usually I say how many are available or whether it's one of one.
Okay, so make sure to follow at alpha_velo for those prints.
Yes, yes. Follow the shop, and usually every maybe end of the year, I usually make prints, and throughout the year, I'll pull out like a piece or two, like one of one that I like, or I wanna. A lot of times, I have things that I just don't want to sell. I like it myself. It's hard to put a price on on something when you like it.
All right, so we'll wrap up this interview, Prempton, with a few rapid fire questions that touch on all of the topics that we've talked about here. So I'll ask you to choose between two things. You tell me which one you pick, and just a very, very quick rationale as to why you're picking one rather than the others. So again, rapid fire. We'll do this quickly. All right, let's start with the first one. France or Italy?
Italy,
Why?
better coffee.
All right, you're a wine guy as well, Prempton. We can tell from your Instagram. So Barolo or Brunello?
Ooh, Brunello.
Why?
Just personal taste, the way it hits my mouth, my palate.
Bordeaux or Bourgogne?
To be honest with you, I'm more of a white wine guy.
So you would definitely go Burgundy in that case.
Yeah, yeah.
Steel or carbon?
Carbon.
Hmm?
Because
You can do more with it. You can do more with it.
Rolex or Patek?
Paddock, if I could.
You mean you don't have one?
Maybe.
Macchiato or cappuccino?
Macchiato.
Because it's more like an espresso with just a little bit of milk.
No, I just don't like milk.
Okay, so less milk. All
Yeah.
right, and last one, Lance or Cipollini?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Can I pick both?
Alex and I can't pick one either. They're both just too much fun of cyclists. So we're with you on both Lance and Chippo.
I'll party with Cipollini and I'll do a business with Lance.
Premton, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. I just want to remind our listeners, make sure to follow Premton on Instagram at Premton and his shop at alpha_vélo. And you'll hear about all of the different releases that they are bringing to the shop. Okay, so we'll move on to our next segment called Into the Canal, where we take a bad product trend from the world of cycling and we just toss it into the canal where it belongs, never to be seen again. Tony, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm going to give a shout out first. This is actually a collaboration with a cycling buddy of mine, Jack. We sort of discussed this, and I thought this is a perfect into the canal, and that is saggy pockets on your jersey. I would say usually there's two reasons for this. Either you have purchased the wrong size jersey, it's too big, so anything you put in it sort of drags it down. Or what you see a lot, and this is highly unpro, is you've purchased the entire convenience store and just shoved it all in your jersey. You just need maybe a gel, maybe a banana on your ride. You don't need to eat a 10-course meal. So when I see saggy pockets on jerseys, I just know, it's nowhere to go but in the canal. I'm happy to toss it there, and I don't want to ever see it again.
Okay, so my Into the Canal is actually very simple. It's unmatched tires on a bicycle, on a road bicycle, or you could say on a gravel bicycle as well. Um, if you have an issue with one of your tires, let's say you slash a tire, the tire is garbage, you have to toss it, either buy the same tire as the other tire that's already on your bike, but if you can't find that very same tire, I'm sorry, but you have to replace both tires. They have to be
Definitely.
matched. They have to be the same. If you have, let's say one tan sidewall and another non-tan sidewall, or one Continental and one Schwalbe, um, I know it's frustrating. I know it's more money. You have to make sure that the symmetry on your bike remains. You have to make sure that the back is like the front. It just looks better. It just feels better. And trust me, unmatched tires are into the canal. Not to say that you can't use the functional tire again. You can keep it in reserve for when you find the other tire that you're missing, but you have to be running the same tires on your bike.
Yeah, I want to go actually even beyond canal with this comment quickly. Just that I think that this actually should be a commandment. If Cycling Fashion Weeks ever gets around to kind of doing the 10 cycling fashion commandments, this would be one of them, because it is that important of an item on your bike to make sure your tires are matched, that the logo on the tire and the valve is lined up. It should all be even and symmetrical. Good call, Alex.
And just to make sure that people understand that this is not a comment about tires, this is a comment about symmetry. The same rule holds for your bottle cages. For example, if you have two bottle cages on your frame, they have to be the same bottle cage. You can't
Correct.
have a black one and a stainless steel one. They have to be the same thing at all times. Symmetry is very important in cycling. All right, so moving on to our next segment called Rate. We rate your bike for free. This is very simple, as the name says. You send us an email at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com. Include a few pics of your bicycle, ideally a few. It would help us provide a more complete assessment of your bike, and we will rate your bike for free on the show. We'll give you ideas as to how you can improve the look of your bike overall. So this week we had a very nice email from Arnaud from Quebec, and Arnaud says, "Hi guys, please rate my bike." Haha. So he's an aha guy, not an LOL guy, which kind of says something about his style already there. So his bike, he said, it's a Cervelo C3. He specifies that is all carbon. It's got Ultegra 6800, and the wheels are HED or HED Ardennes Plus. The bike We'll put it up on our Instagram as we always do at Cycling Fashion Week. Make sure you follow us there. Looks like it's a pretty large frame. I would say that's got to be at least a 56 or maybe even a 58. It's sort of a charcoal gray glossy color. However, on the lower tube, there's white paint sort of faded in, and then it says Cervelo on it. It's got a straight fork. It's got a little bit of red on the fork. I'd say so this is not the Cervelo R5 that we talked about earlier. That's the C3. It's a little bit more sloped, I would say, than the R5. It's got dropped seat stays, like virtually every bike in the market now. Disc brakes, and yeah, that's it. Tony, what are your thoughts about Arnaud's Cervelo C3?
So Cervelo, as I mentioned before, is well known as a sort of dentist brand, and I don't know why with the C3, I don't get the dentist vibe. This feels more like an engineering student, young engine, sort of young structural engineering student's bike. And for whatever reason, and I don't know, maybe it's because we talked earlier about the R5 and I didn't mind it so much. So I don't hate this. He does have some issues, obviously. That is the stack under the stem is way too high. He's got to cut that. That's a very easy, quick fix. No tan walls. I'm going to be very positive about the head wheels. Head is not represented very well in the streets. I find, I don't know if they've had some distribution stuff that used to be a little more popular. So I like when you see someone using a brand that not everyone uses. Overall, I wouldn't say that this is as disappointing as a Cervelo could be, but at the same time, with the drop seat stays, the Lacatan sidewalls, the stack under the stem of the steer tube, the cabling is kind of clean. I can't go higher than a 6.5, 6.5, maybe 7 because I had a good comments about the Cervelo R5, but it's not as awful as it could be, but there's definitely some improvements that could be made. And I'm going to give him credit because it's a Cervelo that I'm not absolutely disgusted by.
Yeah, so likewise, I'm not a Cervelo guy to begin with, but there's a lot to like about this bike. So first of all, the fact that the paint job here is glossy, and actually on the photo that he sent us, and we'll post it, it just kind of pops. I mean, he's got this charcoal gray on like a background of red brick, and the charcoal gray really pops. There's almost like a purple hue to it that I really like. I'm with Tony on the head wheels. Cool brand that you probably don't see enough of, and I know I'd be curious about hearing the hub sound of those wheels. Not sure what kind of hubs they have on them, but it sounds expensive, so I'm gonna say that I like that. It's got a good looking crank too. I would say that bike
True.
reminds me of the cranks that you used to see on the Cannondale Super 6 Evo from maybe like 5 years ago, which I
The
think is
Cannondale proprietary crank. Yeah, yeah.
which I think is potentially the best looking crank of all time. Obviously, this crank is not that Cannondale proprietary crank because it's a Cervelo, but it reminds me a little bit of that one, and I have to say I really really like that. It seems like he's running big tires on that bike as well. There's got to be at least a 30 millimeter tire, so he probably uses this as his all road bike. I'm assuming that where he lives, there's a lot of dirt roads or gravel roads. So if you're going out on a road ride, you may still have 20% of your ride on gravel. So he's using these tires. I'm a big tire guy. I run 28 millimeters on my Marinoni. I think they're generally better. Now, one thing he could do to improve the look of his bike that would be pretty easy. Um, he's got a few too many spacers on that stem there. Looks like he's got 2 or 3 spacers. He's got a bit of a stack there under his stem. Arnaud, my friend, you gotta remove those. It's gonna hurt your back a little bit. It's gonna be a little bit uncomfortable, but hey, you can do a little bit of stretching here and there to get used to the lower stem. But it's just more pro. You got to do that, and that's a piece of advice that we give people a lot on We Rate Your Bike for Free, but it is kind of mandatory.
I just want to give him actually a 0.5 of a bump. So what does that take us to 7 or 7.5? Is his bottle cages. Although not Arundel, which is really the sort of top. I believe they're elite. I can't tell from the sort of one picture you sent, but he has kept the color theme in line with his bike. they go very well with the bike, and those are the sort of little subtleties that, regardless of what bike you happen to own, we expect everyone to be doing, and is matching the little sort of things like that to either the color or the style or the era of your bike. So it's a carbon bike with carbon frames. It's got the red, the blue, a little bit of the red and the sort of gray in the cages. So kudos to the cages.
I'm gonna give him another 0.5. Um, he doesn't have a saddlebag, which no saddlebag is a very clean look. You know, when you think Cervelo, you think dentists. Now, I don't know if Arnaud works in the dental field at all, but
I'm telling you, he's an engineer for sure.
one thing that I do appreciate about this is that he doesn't have a saddlebag, because a lot of dentists, what you see is they're riding a very nice expensive bike, and then they're gonna have this big bulky saddlebag in the back that ruins the look of their bike. My view is you either go for a very thin saddlebag or no saddlebag at all. No saddlebag though, that's a bold move, because you got to call your wife or your partner to come pick you up if you're in trouble. And I see that Arnaud likes to live dangerously there with the no saddlebag look. So I'm going to give him another 0.5. I think I'd go 8 out of 10 for this bike here.
All right, so we're not too far off, but Arnaud, you got some work to do, but thanks for sending in the bike.
And make sure to send us your bikes at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com, and we'll review them on the podcast. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in to Cycling Fashion Week. We'll be back next week with another episode. Warren should be back from his riding adventures in areas with no internet. Again, follow us on Instagram at Cycling Fashion Week. Write us an email, cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends about it, and make sure to keep listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.